Ever since I find out that my CEO husband, Rowan Goodwin, is incapable of letting his first love, Megan Dolton, who's divorced and has a child of her own, go, I begin teaching our son, Ryan Goodwin, to address Rowan as Mr. Goodwin all the time. When Ryan is burning up with a fever, Megan chooses to summon Rowan away from us in the middle of the night. As I caress Ryan's scalding forehead, I instruct him to tell Rowan, goodbye, Mr. Goodwin. When Rowan has agreed to attend the teacher-parent conference with Ryan, Megan and calls him with tears streaking down her cheeks, claiming that her own son, Nelson Herrera, doesn't have a father to accompany him, so Rowan doesn't hesitate to ditch us once again. Without bothering to raise my head, I pass my phone to Ryan so that he can take leave from Mr. Goodwin in the parents' group chat. Every time, Ryan always hesitates for a long time before carrying out my orders. Later on, Rowan finally realizes that he has owed us far too much, so he takes the initiative to suggest that we take a family portrait together. When we reach the photography studio, Megan calls Rowan. Once again, her sobs can be heard drifting from the loudspeaker. Rowan, can you please come over and pick Nelson up from school? The children at the kindergarten keep making fun of him for not having a father. Pity crosses Rowan's expression immediately. He's about to crouch down and explain to Ryan when the latter just waves airily at him without me having to nudge him. It's fine, Mr. Goodwin, you should accompany the other child. Mommy and I are the only ones needed for the family portrait. As soon as our son Ryan Goodwin's words fell, my husband Rowan Goodwin and I froze at the same time. In the 28 days following the realization that Rowan was emotionally checked out of our family, whenever he walked out on Ryan and me for Megan, I had Ryan call him Mr. Goodwin as a reminder to both of us not to waste our tears on someone who wasn't worth it. Ryan, however, didn't see things that way. He was only 7 years old, an age when a boy was most dependent on his father. Every time I asked him to call Rowan, that he would hesitate for a long time before murmuring Mr. Goodwin. Yet now he had said it on his own. It was so smooth and natural, as if he had rehearsed those two words countless times in his heart. Noticing that we were both stunned, Ryan took my hand and told Rowan, Mr. Goodwin, you should go handle your business. Then he looked up at me. Let's go, Mommy. We're going to miss our appointment. He pulled me along, walking step by step toward the photo studio. Rowan was the one who suggested the family photo to make up for missing Ryan's parent-teacher meeting, and Ryan had been looking forward to it for half a month. I followed him stiffly. My chest felt so tight and heavy, like a boulder was crushing it, and I just wanted to cry. Rowan's affair came to light by pure chance. He had gone to celebrate Megan Dolton's son Nelson Herrera's birthday, and when he came home, he forgot the receipt in his pocket, a family ticket for 3 to Starlight Studios. On Ryan's 6th birthday, he had made a wish for all of us to go to Starlight Studios to see his favorite Minions. Rowan had called it childish and rejected the idea without a second thought. Yet only a few days later, he went there with Megan's son. I found Megan's post on Rowan's phone. The most magical place must be visited with the best daddy. The photo was a picture of Rowan and Megan holding the child between them. Megan was his first love, who was now divorced and had a child of her own. That night, Rowan and I had the worst fight we had ever had. I insisted on taking Ryan and getting a divorce. Rowan accused me of being unreasonable and asked how I could bear to let our child grow up without a father. Then he swore to God that he only pitied Megan. Looking at Ryan's face, which had turned visibly pale with fright, I bit my lips so hard I nearly drew blood. I knew that if I forced Ryan to leave with me right then, he would never be able to forget Rowan, but I knew even better that once a cheater, always a cheater. I refused to let Ryan suffer endless grievances just because of Rowan's suckled sympathy. Consequently, I chose a different approach. I tricked Rowan into signing the divorce agreement. There was about a month before the divorce would be finalized. During those days, if Rowan could turn his life around, I would pretend nothing had ever happened for Ryan's sake. If not, I would use those days to do everything in my power to desensitize Ryan. It was the 28th day, and Ryan had taken the initiative to call Ryan Mr. Goodwin, holding Ryan's slightly shivering frame. I couldn't find it in myself to feel happy. If anything, my heart felt as though it was being pierced by 1,000 needles. While we were crossing the street, Rowan finally snapped back to reality. He chased after us for a few steps, wanting to ask Ryan what was going on. When Megan's phone call came through again, her voice carried that same sweet, whiny tone as she asked, "Where are you, Rowan?"
Nil.
Keeps crying and saying he wants his daddy. I can't calm him down. Rowan stopped in his tracks. He stared at Ryan's and my retreating figures before responding. All right, I'll be there in a minute. Right after saying that, he sent me a message that read, "Let's talk tonight." Without a moment's hesitation, he turned and left. The roar of the car engine sounded behind us and gradually faded away into the distance. Ryan came to a halt, threw himself into my arms, and soaked my clothes with his tears. Mommy, we don't need daddy anymore, okay? We didn't take the family portrait. I took Ryan straight back home and packed our bags. While I was booking the plane tickets back to my hometown, Megan sent me a video. The background was another famous photo studio in the city. Megan and Rowan were wearing matching outfits, holding a boy who was about 5 years old and posing for the camera. At the end of the video, she taunted me as usual. It's just a family portrait, Rowan, and I can take one whenever we want. In the past, I would have clapped back the very second I read Megan's taunts. But now, as I watched Ryan carefully organize his toys, I realized I just didn't care anymore. I exited the chat and booked 2 plane tickets to Ivershire for the day after tomorrow. I had just completed the payment when Rowan walked through the door with his strawberry cake. Rowan got down on one knee and set the strawberry cake down next to me. He sounded both helpless and affectionate as he continued. I know what's going on in your head, Gigi. You think I'm treating Meg too well and neglecting you and Rye. But I swear, I only pity Meg. She's a single mom. I just don't want her to be too sad. Rowan took my hand and solemnly placed it over his heart.
Just give me a little more time.
I promise I'll sort things out with Meg and her son. I won't let you, or I feel neglected. Ever again, I stared at him blankly. I could hardly remember the last time he had looked at me so earnestly. Perhaps it was during our wedding ceremony in that pristine white chapel, where our hands were laced together as he vowed to love and cherish me for the rest of his life. Or perhaps it was the day Ryan came into the world, in the hospital delivery room, when he carefully cradled Ryan in his arms, his lips trembling as he pressed a kiss to my forehead and whispered, Gigi, from now on, I'll never let anyone or anything hurt you and Ryan again. Looking back on those memories, I fell silent for a long while. In the end, I decided to tell him about the divorce, Rowan, to be honest.
Bye.
Where did you put that limited edition Lego set you bought for Rye last time? Is it in the study cabinet? Meg said Nell has been into Lego lately, so I'm going to let him play with it for a few days. That he went into the study, dug out that box of Lego, grabbed his car keys, and rushed out the door with a loud thud. The front door slammed shut and Rowan's figure disappeared. I stared at the door for a long time before whispering the words I hadn't finished earlier, to be honest. I don't want you anymore. There were only 2 days left until we left for good. At midnight, having finally finished packing everything, I collapsed onto the bed in sheer exhaustion. Just then my phone lit up. It was a message from Rowan. Mel loves the Lego. I spent the whole night building it with him. Meg specifically asked me to thank you. At midnight, my husband was thanking me on behalf of another woman. I tugged at the corner of my lips and I jeered out of sheer disbelief. However, I couldn't be bothered to be upset. After all, the outcome would be the same either way. Opened the chat box and casually replied, don't mention it, I wasn't the one who gave it to her. By the way, that Lego set was Ryan's absolute favorite birthday gift. He's been waiting all this time for you to find the time to build it with him. After sending that single message, I powered off my phone, closed my eyes, and went to sleep, unconcerned about how Rowan's expression might change. Upon reading the text on the other end of the line, 8 on my way, and the following day, Rowan came home unusually early after stepping inside and taking off his coat. He froze in his tracks at the sight of several suitcases arranged neatly in the living room without even putting his coat down. He walked into the bedroom and asked me, looking slightly panicked, do you really need to pack this much luggage for a trip? I was helping Ryan get dressed, so I responded without sparing him a glance. The place we're going to is far away. After hearing that, he immediately looked at Ryan. Rowan relaxed after Ryan nodded. Then he set his coat aside and pulled out 3 tickets to Starlight Studios. Weren't you always mad at me for not taking Ryan to Starlight Studios? I bought tickets for today. The 3 of us can go together as a family. I laid them out in front of Ryan and me, as if he were showing them off. In fact, his face was filled with affection. For a moment, I wondered if I had misheard him. It had been nearly a month since that incident, and he was only remembering it now. However, I recalled the string of unread messages on my phone when I woke up this morning, and it suddenly clicked. So this was his idea of compensation. I didn't say a word as I continued to focus on helping Ryan get dressed. Ryan, on the other hand, was incredibly excited. With wide eyes, he gazed at me. Mommy, I want to go. My eyes crinkled slightly. But before I could say a word, Rowan began to hem and haw. There's just one catch though. Meg knows we're going to take a family portrait today, and she's worried that if Nell hears about it, he'll be upset. So maybe we can put off the family portrait until next time. Guilt was written all over his face as the words left his mouth. Ryan froze bit by bit, the light in his eyes visibly dimmed. I see. Slowly, he lowered his head and fell silent, his eyes pooling with tears. Completely oblivious, Rowan continued. Meg only asked for this one little favor, and honestly, I didn't think it was a big deal. We can always take the family portrait some other time, right?
Right.
He had no idea that Ryan and I were leaving tomorrow. This was his very last chance. Yet neither Ryan nor I said a word, we merely nodded wordlessly all right. Okay, Rowan breathed a sigh of relief, and a visible smile spread across his face as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. In that case, I'll tell Meg right now, see you at Starlight Studios at 3 p.m. With that, he rose to his feet and left. When he was almost at the door, he turned back around. Honey Rye, you two are the best. Neither Ryan nor I made a sound once he left. Ryan jumped off the bed and took the backpack he had already prepared from the closet. I don't ever want to see Mr. Goodwin again, Mommy. Can we leave early? I changed our flight tickets to 3 p.m. that day. After confirming the passenger information, I immediately started making the final preparations for our departure. At 9 a.m. I made breakfast in this house for the very last time. The cake Rowan had bought last night was still in the fridge. Ryan took it out and threw it into the trash at 10 o'clock. I retrieved the divorce agreement Rowan had signed from my lawyer. The first clause stated that I had full custody of Ryan. While we waited, I came across Megan's new post. Our family portrait is finally in our hands. My boy and his daddy love it so much. They said it has to be hung right where everyone can see it. Ryan was beside me folding paper airplanes. When he saw the post, he didn't comment on it and merely urged me, hurry up and sign it, Mommy, at 1 p.m. After Ryan and I finished lunch, we gathered all of our bags and suitcases and took a cab to the airport. There were still 2 hours left until our scheduled meeting with Rowan holding an iPad. Ryan quietly looked through the photos of him and Rowan in the album. There was a photo from his 1-month celebration party, where Rowan had cradled him and proudly shown him off to everyone. There was another from when he was 3 years old, where Rowan held him close as they both threw up peace signs while watching a Minions movie together. There was also a video from when he turned 7 years old this year, right before Megan appeared, of Rowan following close behind him, teaching him how to ride a bicycle. Ryan watched them over and over again without shedding a tear, yet a heavy, suffocating sadness filled the entire cab. I sat beside him in silence. At 2 p.m. we were about to go through security when Rowan called. Gigi, please tell Rye I'm incredibly sorry. Nell fell and got hurt and I had to rush him to the hospital. I'm not sure if I can make it by 3 p.m. If you guys don't see me, just go home, please tell Rye I'm sorry. He hung up on me, missing the boarding announcement echoing through the departure hall. Let's go. I took Ryan's hand, he nodded, selected all the photos in the album and deleted them all with a single tap. At 3 p.m. sharp the plane took off. I placed the headphones over Ryan's ears and gazed out the window at the blue sky and white clouds, letting out a long sigh from the very depths of my soul.
Goodbye, Rowan.
Meanwhile, ignoring Megan's tearful pleas, Rowan bolted out of the hospital and sped towards Starlight Studios. The tires of Rowan's Porsche screeched against the asphalt as he pulled into the VIP parking lot of Starlight Studios. It was 3:45 p.m. He was 45 minutes late. Rowan didn't even turn off the engine before throwing himself out of the driver's seat. The humid afternoon air hit him like a physical blow, but he barely registered it. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic, erratic rhythm that had started the moment he hung up the phone with Gigi. If you guys don't see me, just go home.
Why had he said that?
Why had he assumed, yet again, that they would simply wait for him? He pushed through the crowded entrance of the theme park, his expensive suit entirely out of place among the sea of colorful t-shirts, balloons, and laughing families. He scanned the crowd, his eyes desperately searching for a slender woman in a simple linen dress and a small, quiet 7-year-old boy carrying a yellow backpack. Gigi, he called out, his voice swallowed by the cheerful music blasting from the park speakers. Ryan. He walked toward the designated meeting spot near the Starlight Castle, the very spot Gigi had mentioned when they planned this trip. The area was packed with families taking photos. A mascot dressed as a giant minion was waving to a group of children. Rowan stood there for 20 minutes, his eyes darting to every passing face. He pulled out his phone and dialed Gigi's number. The number you have dialed is currently unavailable or out of service. A cold sweat broke out on the back of his neck. He dialed Ryan's smartwatch. The number you have dialed. Rowan's fingers began to tremble. He tried messaging Gigi on WeChat, but a gray exclamation mark immediately appeared next to his text. Your message was sent, but the recipient has blocked you. No, Rowan muttered, his chest tightening.
No.
He ran back to his car, ignoring the strange looks from passers-by. He drove back to the villa at a speed that borderlined on suicidal. The entire way, he kept telling himself that they were just angry. Gigi was stubborn, but she loved him. She had threatened divorce before, during their worst fights, but she had never actually followed through. She wouldn't, not over something like this. He parked the car haphazardly on the lawn and threw open the heavy double doors of the villa. Gigi. Ryan. I'm home. His voice bounced off the high marble walls of the foyer. The house was dead.
Silent.
Rowan's boots clicked loudly on the polished floor as he walked into the kitchen. The first thing he saw was the trash can. Resting right on top of the discarded coffee grounds and vegetable peels was the beautiful, expensive strawberry cake he had bought the night before. It hadn't even been opened. The blue ribbon was still tied in a perfect bow, now stained with garbage. A sickening wave of nausea washed over him. He sprinted up the stairs to the master bedroom. The door was wide open. The room was spotless, but it was stripped bare. The vanity table, usually cluttered with Gigi's skincare bottles and perfumes, was completely empty. The closet door stood open, revealing rows of empty hangers. Only his own suits hung there, looking suddenly bleak and lonely. Rowan felt his knees go weak. He stumbled down the hallway to Ryan's room. The bright, colorful room that had once been filled with laughter and the clutter of childhood was hollow. The shelves that once held rows of toy cars, picture books, and stuffed animals were empty. The only thing left was a single, blue crayon lying on the floor. On the small study desk in the corner sat a crisp, white envelope. Rowan walked toward it as if he were approaching a bomb. His hand shook so violently he could barely slide the paper out. It was the divorce agreement. At the bottom of the page, Gigi's elegant signature was already dried and finalized. Beside it was his own signature, bold, black, and permanent. Rowan's mind spun backward. 3 weeks ago, Gigi had handed him a stack of papers during a business trip transition, claiming they were updated trust fund clauses for Ryan's future education. He had been on the phone with Megan at the time, who was crying about Nell's sudden fever, and he had signed the documents. Blindly, barely glancing at the text to get Gigi out of his hair so he could console Megan. She had tricked him. No, she hadn't tricked him. He had handed her the knife, and she had simply used it to cut the final string holding them together. Attached to the divorce papers was a final, printed receipt from the Civil Affairs Bureau. The 30-day cooling-off period had ended today at noon. The divorce was officially, legally registered. Rowan collapsed onto Ryan's small bed, clutching the papers to his chest. The faint scent of baby powder and laundry detergent still lingered on the sheets, but the warmth was gone. He pressed his face into the pillow, a low, ragged sob tearing from his throat. Just then, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out with desperate hope, thinking it was Gigi. It was a WeChat message from Megan. Rowan, the doctor says Nell's scrape isn't serious, but he's still really shaken up. He keeps asking when his daddy Rowan is coming back to play Lego with him. Are you still at the theme park? If you're free, can you bring some dinner over? For the first time in his life, Rowan looked at Megan's message and felt nothing but a cold, suffocating rage. The offices of Goodwin Group were silent, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the frantic typing of Rowan's personal secretary, assistant Chun. Rowan sat behind his desk, his eyes bloodshot, his jaw covered in a dark
Stubble.
He hadn't slept in 72 hours. He had hired 3 different private investigation agencies, used his corporate connections, and even contacted the airlines. Well, Rowan's voice was hoarse, cracking under the strain of his anxiety. Assistant Chen swallowed hard, holding a tablet tightly. Mr. Goodwin, we tracked Miss Gigi's flight records. She and Ryan boarded a flight to Ivershire 2 days ago at 3 p.m. But that's where the trail ends. What do you mean the trail ends? Rowan slammed his fist on the desk, rattling the pens. She's a woman traveling with a 7-year-old child. They need to check into hotels, they need to buy food, they need to register for school.
How
can the trail end? Miss Gigi's family, they have deep roots in the northern regions, Chen explained cautiously, taking a step back. Her brother, Mr. George, seems to have anticipated your search. He personally handled their transition. All of her bank accounts under the Goodwin name have been closed. She didn't take a single penny of your alimony, sir. She only took the small personal inheritance her grandmother left her. Their phones have been completely deactivated, and new identities, or at least highly protected private accounts, have been set up. Mr. George left a message with our legal department. Chun hesitated, looking terrified. Read it, Rowan commanded, his voice barely a whisper. He said, if Rowan Goodwin attempts to set foot in Ivershire or contact my sister again, the George family will pull all investments from the Goodwin Harbor project, and we will make the details of his emotional infidelity
public.
Let him enjoy his new family in peace. Rowan fell back into his chair, staring blankly at the ceiling. The harbor project was the lifeblood of Goodwin Group's next 5-year plan.
If
The George family pulled out, the company's stock would plummet and the board of directors would oust him before the week was over. Gigi's family had always been quiet, almost invisible during their marriage, because Gigi had insisted on keeping her family's wealth separate to protect Rowan's pride. He had forgotten, or perhaps he had never cared to realize, just how powerful her background actually was. Before he could process the weight of this blow, the glass doors of his office were pushed open. Megan walked in, holding Nell by the hand. She was wearing a soft, pastel-colored dress, her eyes slightly red as if she had been crying looking. The picture of a fragile, vulnerable single mother. Rowan, Megan soft-voiced, ignoring Assistant Chen, who quickly bowed and scurried out of the room. You haven't answered my calls in 3 days. I was so
worried.
Nell missed you so much. Look, he even brought the Lego car you built with him. Nell, a 5-year-old boy with a spoiled pout, held up a mismatched Lego car. Daddy Rowan, play with me. Rowan stared at the boy. Then his eyes slowly drifted to the Lego pieces. It was the limited edition Star Wars collector set. The one Ryan had begged him for on his birthday. The one Rowan had claimed was too expensive and complicated for a child, only to buy it later to appease Gigi, and then hand it over to Megan's son without a second thought. A sudden, terrifying clarity washed over Rowan. He looked at Megan. He saw the subtle, calculated way she tilted her head, the way she squeezed her eyes to make them look tearful, the way she always timed her crises right when Gigi and Ryan needed him. On Ryan's birthday. On Ryan's parent-teacher conference. On the day of their family portrait. Did you know? Rowan asked, his voice deathly quiet. Megan blinked, her innocent expression faltering slightly. Know what, Rowan? Did you know that Gigi was divorcing me? Rowan stood up slowly, leaning his hands on the desk. Did you know that every time you called me, crying about a broken light bulb, a minor scrape, or a lonely afternoon, you were pulling me away from my own son's life and death moments? Rowan, how can you say that? Megan's voice trembled, tears instantly spilling over her cheeks. I'm a single mother. I have no one else to rely on. You promised my father on his deathbed that you would take care of me. I promised him I would ensure you were financially stable. Rowan roared, the sound echoing through the executive suite. Megan flinched, and Nell began to cry. In earnest. I didn't promise him I would throw my wife and son into the trash to play daddy to your child. I gave you an apartment, I gave you an allowance, I gave you everything a friend could give. But you wanted more, didn't you? You wanted Gigi's place. You wanted my son's father. Rowan, no. That's not true. Megan grabbed his arm, her face pale with genuine
Panic now.
I love you. We were first loves. If it weren't for your family's interference back then, we would have been married. Rowan looked down at her hand on his sleeve. He felt a sudden, violent wave of revulsion. Back then, you left me because my family was facing a temporary bankruptcy and you chose to marry a wealthy heir in the South, Rowan said, his voice dropping to a cold, hard register. Don't talk to me about love, Megan. You came back to me only when you got divorced and saw that the Goodwin Group had become a multi-billion-dollar empire. He pulled his arm away from her grip with such force that she stumbled back. Get out, Rowan said. Rowan, get out of my office, get out of my apartment, and get out of my life. Rowan warned, his eyes dark with a promise of ruin. If I ever see your face, or if you ever try to contact me again, I will personally ensure that every cent of your allowance is cut off and your ex-husband gets full custody of your son. I have the legal team to do it, Megan. Don't test me. Megan's face drained of all color. She realized, with absolute certainty, that the gentle, easily manipulated Rowan she had played for years was gone. Underneath was the ruthless CEO who had built Goodwin Group into a monster. Without another word, she grabbed Nell's hand and fled the office, the sound of her high heels clicking frantically down the corridor. Rowan sank back into his chair. He looked at the Lego car Nell had dropped on the floor. It had shattered into several pieces upon impact. He slowly knelt down, picking up the small plastic bricks one by one, trying to
Piece them back together.
But he didn't have the instructions. He didn't know where the pieces went. He sat on the floor of his empty office, clutching the broken toys of a son who no longer had a father, and wept. 3 months later, Ivershire was a quiet, misty coastal town in the north, far removed from the bustling, polluted metropolis of their old life. Here, the air smelled of salt, wet pine needle leaves, and the cold, clean ocean breeze. At the edge of the town's main street, nestled between a local bakery and a flower shop, was a newly renovated bookstore called the Safe Harbor. Inside, the warm glow of yellow pendant lights illuminated rows of wooden bookshelves. A soft, acoustic melody played in the background, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air. Gigi stood behind a counter, wearing a simple cream-colored knit sweater and her hair tied back in a loose bun. Her face, which had been pale and drawn for the last year of her marriage, was now flush with healthy color. There were no designer bags on her shoulders, no heavy diamond rings on her fingers, but her eyes held a peaceful, unbothered serenity that she hadn't felt in a decade. "Mommy, look what I drew." Ryan ran out from the back room of the bookstore. He was wearing a small green apron that matched Gigi's, his cheeks rosy from the chilly afternoon air. He held up a drawing of a giant blue whale swimming next to a small wooden boat. Gigi smiled warmly, leaning over the counter to press a kiss to his forehead. "It's beautiful, Rye. Is that us in the boat?" "Yes." Ryan nodded proudly, his eyes bright and sparkling. "You're steering and I'm catching the fish. We don't need a big ship, right? Small boats are safer." Gigi's heart swelled. Small boats are safer. At 7 years old, Ryan had developed a quiet wisdom that sometimes broke her heart, but she was grateful for his resilience. In the first few weeks of their arrival in Ivershire, Ryan had suffered from night terrors. He would wake up, crying, clutching his stuffed minion, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mr. Goodwin. I'll be good, don't leave." But with the help of a local therapist, the soothing rhythm of the ocean, and Gigi's undivided, unconditional love, the shadows had begun to fade. Ryan no longer asked about his father. He no longer looked at the door with anxious anticipation every time a car drove past. He had made friends at the local elementary school, boys who didn't care about his father's CEO status or his expensive toys, but who loved him because he was fast at tag and shared his snacks. "Go hang it up on our gallery wall, sweetheart," Gigi soft-voiced. Ryan cheered and ran off to the corner of the shop, where a bulletin board was covered in his colorful drawings, school certificates, and photos of the two of them building sandcastles on the beach. Just then, the bell above the door chimed, indicating a customer had entered. "Welcome to the Safe Harbor," Gigi said automatically, not looking up as she wiped down the espresso machine. "Gigi." The cloth in Gigi's hand froze. The voice was deeply familiar, yet it sounded hollow, thin, and desperate. She slowly raised her head. Rowan stood by the entrance. He looked like a ghost of his former self. The expensive, tailored suits were gone, replaced by a simple gray coat that looked slightly loose on his thin frame. His face was gaunt, his eyes deeply sunken and rimmed with red. He looked as though he hadn't slept a full night in months. Gigi didn't gasp. She didn't scream. She didn't drop the cloth. She simply stared at him, her expression completely flat, as if she were looking at a stranger who had walked into her shop asking for directions. "We are closing in 10 minutes, Gigi said, her voice cool and professional. "If you're looking for a book, you'll have to be quick." Rowan flinched. The absolute lack of anger in her voice was more terrifying than any screaming match they had ever had. Anger meant there was still feeling. Indifference was a death sentence. "Gigi, please." Rowan took a step forward, his hands trembling. "I've been searching for you for 98 days. I've gone to every city, every town. I only wanted to see you. To see Ryan." "You've seen us," Gigi said, her voice remaining perfectly level. "Now you can go." "Gigi, let me explain," Rowan pleaded, his eyes filling with tears as he reached out toward her, though he didn't dare cross the counter. "I cut off Megan. Completely. I kicked her out of my life, and I haven't spoken to her since the day you left. I realize now what a fool I was. She was manipulating me, Gigi. She used my guilt about her father to drive a wedge between us." "Rowan," Gigi interrupted him, her voice quiet but carrying a weight that cut him off instantly. "Do not blame Megan for what you did." Rowan froze. "Megan didn't force you to ignore our son's fever," Gigi said, her eyes boring into his. "Megan didn't hold a gun to your head and make you skip his parent-teacher conference. Megan didn't make you take her son to Starlight Studios while you told our son his wish was childish. You did all of those things, Rowan. You chose to do them. Every single time you looked at the scales, and you decided that Ryan and I were worth less than her tears." "I was wrong," Rowan cried out, a tear spilling down his cheek. He fell to his knees right there on the wooden floor of the bookstore, his head bowed. "I was so blind, Gigi. I took you for granted because you were always there. I thought you would never leave. I thought Ryan would always be my son. Please give me one chance. Just one." Let me be a father to him again. Let me make it up to him. Gigi looked down at the man kneeling before her. This was the man she had loved. For 10 years, the man she had built a life with. She felt a faint, lingering sadness, but it was the sadness one feels for a character in a tragic movie, not for someone who belonged in her life. Before she could speak, the curtain to the back room parted. Ryan walked out, holding a box of thumbtacks. He stopped in his tracks when he saw the man kneeling on the floor. Rowan gasped, his eyes widening as he looked at his son. Ryan.
By my
Boy, he scrambled to his feet, reaching out his arms. Look at you, you've grown so much. Daddy's here. Daddy came to take you and Mommy home. We can go to Starlight Studios tomorrow, Rye. I bought the VIP passes. We can see the Minions. We can build the biggest Lego set you want. Ryan didn't run to him. He didn't cry. He slowly took a step back, moving behind Gigi's skirt, his small hand gripping her sweater tightly. He looked at Rowan with a calm, polite, and entirely detached expression. Hello, Mr. Goodwin, Ryan said. The words echoed in the quiet bookstore, cold and heavy. Mr. Goodwin. Rowan felt as if a physical hand had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart until it bled. He stared at his 7-year-old son, expecting to see fear, or anger, or perhaps a hidden longing. But there was nothing. Ryan's eyes were clear, polite, and completely devoid of the warmth the child should have for his father. It was the same look Ryan gave the mailman or the delivery drivers who came to the store. Rye, why are you calling me that? Rowan choked out, his voice cracking.
I'm
Your daddy. You used to call me daddy. Remember? We played Lego together. I taught you how to ride a bike. Ryan looked down at his own small shoes, then back up at Rowan. That was a long time ago, Mr. Goodwin. Mommy says we shouldn't dwell on the past. It's bad for our future. No, Ryan, no. Rowan fell to his knees again, trying to get closer, but Gigi stepped forward, shielding Ryan completely behind her body. That's enough, Rowan, Gigi said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, icy tone. You are crossing the line.
He's my son, Gigi.
Rowan cried, his eyes wild with despair. You can't do this.
To me.
You can't teach him to hate me. I never taught him to hate you, Gigi said softly. If I wanted him to hate you, I would have told him about the affairs, about the lies, about how you threw his cake in the trash and chose another woman's child over him on his birthday.
I didn't do any of that.
I simply taught him the truth. She looked down at Rowan, her eyes filled with a quiet, devastating pity. The truth is, you are Mr. Goodwin. You are a wealthy businessman who once lived in the same house as us. You are a man who had a responsibility, and you resigned from it. You cannot walk out on a child for 28 days, leave him to burn with a fever, ditch him on his birthday, and then expect him to hold onto a title you threw away. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Rowan sobbed, his shoulders shaking. He reached out to grab the hem of Gigi's sweater, but she stepped back, out of his reach. Go back to your city, Rowan, Gigi said. Your life is there. Your company is
There.
We have nothing left to give you. I don't care about the company. Rowan screamed, his voice breaking. I'll give it all up. I'll move here to Ivershire. I'll buy a house next door. I'll clean the bookstore for you, Gigi. Just let me be near you. Let me see Ryan grow up. Gigi looked at him for a long, silent moment. Do you remember the day Ryan was born, Rowan? She asked quietly. Rowan nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face.
Yes, yes.
I held him. I cried. I promised I would protect you both. And, do you remember the day you went to Starlight Studios with Megan's son? Gigi's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like a blade. While Ryan was blowing out his candles alone at home, wishing for his father to be there, you were holding another child's hand, posing for a photo, calling yourself his best daddy. Where was your promise then, Rowan? Rowan opened and closed his mouth, but no sound came out. You broke the covenant, Rowan, Gigi said, her voice steady and resolute.
Some
things once broken cannot be glued back together, not even with all the money and power you have. She turned to Ryan. Rye, go to the back room and finish your drawing. I'll be there in a minute. Ryan nodded obediently. He didn't look at Rowan again. He turned and walked through the curtain, his steps light and unbothered. He didn't look back once. Rowan didn't leave Ivershire immediately. He stayed at the only luxury hotel in the town, spending his days sitting in a rental car parked across the street from the safe harbor. He watched Gigi open the shop in the morning, greeting the locals with a bright, genuine smile. He watched Ryan walk to school with a group of local children, laughing and joking, his yellow backpack bouncing on his shoulders. He saw how peaceful their life was. He saw that there was no space for him. Every time he tried to approach them, Gigi's brother's men, who had quietly stationed themselves in the town, would appear, blocking his path with cold, silent warnings. One evening, a heavy storm rolled in from the ocean. The wind battered the windows of the bookstore, and the rain fell in driving sheets. Rowan stood outside in the rain, soaked to the bone, staring through the glass window of the shop. Inside, the lights were warm and inviting. Gigi and Ryan were sitting on a plush rug near a small fireplace. Ryan was building a wooden model ship and Gigi was reading a book to him, occasionally pausing to smooth his hair or laugh at
Something he said.
they looked like a picture-perfect family. But Rowan was on the outside, standing in the cold, wet darkness, watching a warmth he would never be allowed to feel again. He realized, with a crushing, absolute finality, that his presence here was not a gesture of love. It was a disturbance. He was a ghost trying to force his way back into the land of the living, only bringing the chill of his own regrets into their sanctuary. He pulled his phone from his pocket. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. He dialed his lawyer. Mr. Goodwin, the lawyer's voice came through, sounding surprised. "We've been trying to reach you. The board of directors is demanding your return. The George family has officially pulled their secondary investments, and we need you to sign the restructured. Tell the board I am resigning as CEO," Rowan said, his voice flat and dead.
What?
"Mr. Goodwin, you can't be serious. The company set up a trust fund," Rowan interrupted, staring through the window at Ryan's laughing face. "Put 80% of my personal shares and assets into it.
The
Sole beneficiary is Ryan Goodwin. He can access it when he turns 18.
The
Trustees will be the George family legal team. I want no control over it. And the remaining 20%, sir? Keep enough for me to live on quietly," Rowan whispered. "The rest,
donate it.
to children's hospitals and single-parent charity organizations." He hung up before the lawyer could protest. He took one last look through the glass window. As if sensing his gaze, Gigi slowly raised her head from her book. Her eyes met his through the rain-streaked glass. There was no hatred in her eyes, no malice, no triumph. She merely gave him a small, polite nod, a final, silent farewell from a woman who had completely crossed the river of her grief and reached the other side. Rowan bowed his head. He turned around and walked away into the dark, stormy night, his figure slowly swallowed by the mist of Ivershire. The storm passed by morning, leaving behind a sky of brilliant, clear blue and an ocean that sparkled like diamonds in the early sun. Gigi and Ryan walked along the sandy beach, the cold water lapping at their bare
Feet.
The air was crisp, and the scent of salt was fresh and clean. Ryan was running ahead, chasing a flock of seagulls, his laughter carrying over the sound of the waves. He stopped and dug a beautiful, smooth green sea glass out of the wet sand, running back to hold it up to Gigi. "Look, Mommy, it's like a little emerald." Gigi smiled, taking the small glass and holding it up to the sun. The light filtered through it, warm and bright. "It's beautiful, Rye." The ocean took something broken, washed it clean for a long time, and turned it into something smooth and precious. Ryan tilted his head, looking at the endless horizon. "Mommy?" "Yes, sweetheart." "Is Mr. Goodwin gone?" Gigi paused, looking down at her son's calm face. "Yes, Rye. He went back to his
City."
Ryan nodded slowly. There was no sadness in his expression, only a quiet, peaceful acceptance. "That's good," Ryan said, slipping his hand into hers. He didn't look very happy here. "But we are, right?" Gigi squeezed his small, warm hand, her eyes slightly misty, but her heart completely light. "Yes, Ryan," she whispered, looking out at the rising sun that bathed the quiet town of Ivershire in a golden, hopeful light. "We are very happy." They turned and walked back toward the town, their footprints in the sand slowly washed away by the incoming tide, leaving behind a smooth, clean shore, completely free of the shadows of the past.